Welcome to um, a great matchup today between GSVC and Jasugi. And as you can see, first they are going to play their team league match, but after that they will play their Crazy House World Championship match as well. So we are in for a treat today. And I didn't check the score on their team matches, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, GSVC's team was up, but someone might correct me on that. In any case, it's going to be an interesting matchup. These are two, as you can see as well in the ratings, these are two of the best Crazy House players playing the game. And we have a d4 set up, d5, and GSVC opting to go for a dark square defense here with the bishops. So far, not much had happened. It's actually pretty symmetrical. If you take here on g3, that there's a symmetry still. But he decides to leave it like this. And you would think, well, maybe g5 will trap a piece, but probably some sacrifice should be okay. Although with the bishop on h5, this is probably not so easy for white to prove that he's better. So this might be an option. And also what I like to do in these sort of positions is to take here, and if e takes, you have pressure here. So you put a pawn on e5, and if knight takes, you can take the queen. It does give some initiative to black, but well, it's something to think about. And now it's even more of an idea, because you save your bishop basically by taking on d6 next. But okay, GSVC not going for this. The problem probably is that there's also some bishop takes g3 move, and then the knight can come to e3. But alright, it's an option to consider. Also, it's going to be an option now as well. And for black, he might try to trade on f3 and to gain some active pieces. Because yeah, he's played rook c8, which probably is fine, but white has threats of going after d6, and he can sack on d6 any moment. Maybe knight takes d5 still, or just queen e2 and push e4. It's also possible. So Jasugi decides not to wait for white's plan, and he trades on f3. Usually you follow with something like knight at g5, bishop at h5 to just attack h3. Suggested by Pepe is also maybe knight f5 to cover, but it doesn't really matter if you cover d6, because there's a sack possible and pawn d5 anyway, so you might as well give up d6, try to find something active first. Okay, now a trade and knight g5, I guess. Preserving the knight for g5. And now taking on d6 seems risky. So yeah, first move the queen back. And now you have to cover d6, or you have to try something else, something more active. And yeah, Jasugi taking a moment here. The format here is 5+5, which is a slower time control than you might be used to. The idea of this team league is that every team starts with the top player who assigned to play, who decided to play, and then the number 2 player gets picked, and the number 2 player picks the number 3 player, and all the way around to 6 players per team. And then you have sort of a random team, you could say. And board 1 plays 5+5, and board 2 plays 6+6, and so on. So yeah, you get some slower time controls, but that usually leads to very interesting games. I actually played my 2 games today as well. I'll probably post some analysis on YouTube on that. And here we go, he pushed for e5. He first stacked on c3, or traded, you could say, because the rook and knight are not that far apart. And probably he was scared of some knight takes d5 ideas later. And that knight takes d5 ID binded this knight to f6. Okay, so rook at f5, probably aiming to take this knight, and then after h takes g, you can put a knight on the f5, looking at e7 and d6. So rook at f5 looks good. I mean, it's hard to find a way in here, because you know this is going to happen. So maybe you have to defend here with some bishop move. Drop the bishop on g6 or e6. And there we go. He really needs to cover this square. Knight at f5 is huge, but now white has gotten rid of this knight on g5. Hey Hercules, welcome to the chat. Hope you're doing well. So now gsvc is safe. This knight is gone, and he can slowly figure out a way. He's going bishop at h2. You're putting even more pieces around this king. There was also a suggestion of putting a knight on c8, with the idea of here. You could take that, I guess, and then block. But still, the trade should favor white there, because this rook is doing less than this rook. So you should be fine if you can converge this rook position to this position. So Jasugi in a bit of trouble here. At least that's how it feels. But maybe if he finds a way. He's covering d6 like this. Now knight at f5 was possible. Because of takes, the rook is going to be taken. But knight at c8 is played. It's the same geometry. Mispronounced that, but okay, you get what I mean. The knight is here as well, covering. So rook takes seems like the normal move. And then block on f8 with the knight. But yeah, then there's more pressure coming with with a rook on, another rook on the back rank. But okay, he goes for it and puts the knight on f8 and not drags this one, because this one is covering e5 and that's important. If you place this knight here, you have d takes, and white is winning big material. So knight at f8. Alright, so just as I predicted, the rooks are doubling. Yeah, gsvc did indeed, he beat Janli in the first round. That's hats off. That's a good result. And it's hard to predict this one as well. I think if we go into 3+2, Jasugi might be more the favorite, but even then it's hard to predict who's going to be winning this. Okay, so he takes with the queen and then with the knight. Makes the problem of his queen being pinned here go away, but it does give a queen in hand for white. And 2 rooks. You might have time to put the rooks on the h file, but probably there's something to be found. Yeah, bishop takes d6. If you take, there's d takes e5 and taking f6 next, or d6. It's falling apart, I think. Hey, okay, cat ask. Yeah, gsvc, I guess I'll if you put more time on his clock, he gets stronger compared to other players. Okay, so Jasugi going for something crazy. You could say he's sacking, but here there might be. Well, you can calculate maybe bishop takes f8. Taking the queen, and you're not mated yet, so you still have time to play something like this. But gsvc is just going back. Bishop takes f8, takes queen, there was bishop takes g7 and lots of mating threats. Oh yeah, and just remember guys, I don't know if I told already this, but I'm not live. I'm running on a small delay, so if you have a move suggestion or something like that, I'll be a bit slow to receive it. So if you do, please add a move number with it, or just say it here in the game chat. Then I see it live. Okay. Jasugi taking the bishop on f8 because he was scared of bishop takes g7, as we saw before. This suggestion of queen at h8 and just picking up the pawn, and just allow no counterplay. Probably there's also some other move. Right, queen at c8, bishop at d6 maybe. You can pick up this rook, and then if you don't block with the rook, you can pick up this rook, and there's knight at g6, so you have to block with the rook. Let's say you block with the bishop, there's queen takes, knight at g6, and position falls apart. Yeah, this has to be made somehow, Hercules saying, but it's not so clear, because the rook and knight are doing a good defensive job. So I think a move like pawn d7, just picking up a knight. But now h takes g, rook at h1 and bishop at f3 is the threat. Let's say you take this rook, for example. Rook at h1, take the pawn, bishop at f3. Alright, but he plays knight at f6. He wants to lure away the rook so he can take this one. So if you take here, he will play knight at f6 with the same idea to lure away the rook. So king h7 is played. So now you don't have any knight drops that seem useful. So probably the knight drop on f6 first was better. Okay, so now we see this rook h1, and he wants to run to h3, I guess. But bishop at f3 must be made. Bishop at f3, take. Ah, it's not enough, I guess. I felt like this was really strong, but so gsvc is now winning. Yeah, I just take the rook. That seems best. And now it's made in a couple of moves. Knight f8 is quickest. Alright, gsvc takes the first one. So now it's their second game, Jasugi as white. And after this they will play for the World Championship. Alright, so gsvc takes it, and he now plays a knight f6 setup. And he normally knight c6 included is something you see quite often, but he's not gone for that, and he's immediately going for knight d5, knight takes g2. And one response here is just taking, and then you get pawn at g4 and knight e1, something like that. Another try is just to play d4 and just develop, saying your knight can't go back to f4, it has to go to h4, and then I'll just develop and give up the pawn. And third try, as always, there's always a third try, and that's pawn at g3. So now the knight has no squares to safely run to. It can be covered with pawn at h3, but then probably d4 and knight g5 can pick up the pawn. And the knight is usually very strong in front of the king from white's perspective here. The knight isn't hurting this king, it cannot check it, it's not on a useful square. It doesn't help guard a pawn checking the king or something. So it feels a bit odd, but pawn at g3 restricting this knight. Okay, so now gsvc would like to trade the knights, get knight at h3 maybe, and pawn at f3. But I think Jasugi, yeah, he just takes g4. And now, for example, bishop f3 is a useful threat. And also just knight e5, looking at f7 and c6. So gsvc has some problems to solve here on how to not lose a piece, basically. Let's see what he comes up with. Would maybe try knight e5 to get rid of this bishop. But yeah, it looks. I just you can see here in the tournament chat. Sometimes people commenting they cannot see the chat, but you can whisper, as you, we call that. You can whisper to chat to share your thoughts. Okay, he goes for e5, and Jasugi was probably expecting it because he immediately replies with pawn at b7, and now the bishop is on a awkward square. Going for d4 and pawn at d7, if possible, will be a strong threat. So takes. Then what? And I guess rook e1 is coming. It's suggested to go bishop c8 again. I guess it's possible. But he just takes on d4. Okay, and knight at a5 play. Hey, Kaidenov, thanks for the follow. Alright, so this is obvious looking at these two squares, so if you move the bishop, this one is taken. And yeah, it looks tough for gsvc here to find a move. And also note that Jasugi barely didn't use any time. So now you might have a think about what to do. Take here is a the idea is to open up the bishop and then the rook, I mean, and then later on there might be some threats around the h file. I see stun, thanks for the follow. But I guess you have time to take it, I think. Yeah, bishop c8 because pawn e6 was really annoying, or just a rook e1 or queen e2 idea. Probably queen e2. So pawn at e6, you can take on f7. So now there's no pawn at e6, but there might just be, yeah, knight takes e6 threatening the queen. d4 is now under attack. Okay, no knight d5 because this is on. So knight takes d4 probably. Just grabbing another pawn. Or maybe going for the same idea as before and play pawn at b7. And then pawn at d7, for example. To get the king on an awkward square, and then you go knight takes d. But yeah, now that the c pawn is gone, the bishop is actually doing something useful on this diagonal. So maybe pawn b7 wasn't it. And Jasugi also didn't go for it. He went queen e2. Okay, so this is always queen e2 is always, when it's check, it's always hard where to put a pawn. Yeah, it's nice that Kadask is indeed contributing in chat as well with some moves. Okay, so pawn at e6 now was possible because the queen is also covering, I guess. But what is the plan of the bishop e6? Probably pawn at b7 um, to gain the rook. Okay, so gsvc going for knight at h3 first. I guess if you take the knight, there's rook takes h5 and bishop at f3 as a threat. But then again, white also is threatening pawn at d7. So king takes g2, rook takes h5, pawn at d7, takes. Knight, you get this knight, so knight at e5. Looks really strong. The king has to move up because the king can't go back. Rook takes h5, pawn at d7 should win. Feels winning. So okay, he goes queen takes e6, and if you trade queens, you have to take with the bishop. Then there might be some bishop takes f7 or pawn at d7 first. So queen takes, bishop, whoa, sorry about that. Bishop takes, pawn at d7. King takes, knight at d5, king c8. Should win the game. Or maybe just a pawn short. Jasugi not going for it, but I felt queen takes e7, or queen takes e6 was winning. Okay, so now rook takes h5, seems logical. Because f7 was under attack. You need to do something. Yeah, I'm curious if it was made, but we'll see. Felt like queen takes e6 was just winning. Alright, but still white is a very safe position, it feels. And he has to do something about the obvious rook at d8, yeah? So bishop d7. Bishop takes e6, queen takes e6, so pawn at b7 doesn't work. Maybe it does, but pawn at b7, bishop takes, knight takes. Queen takes, and bishop at f3 or anywhere along this diagonal. Should win for white, I guess. There was also pawn at d5 as suggested, but this, yeah, feels very secure for white as well. He's putting the bishop on d5, so now there's also threatened queen takes f7 with mate to follow. Knight at h4. Okay, point is if you take, there's knight at f4. Takes, and then the queen is on breeze. So he just takes with the queen. Now knight at g1 maybe. So the king has to move in the open. If you take, then bishop at f3, and you just gave him a rook. So the king cannot run back. But what now? Bishop at f3 or c6 is at least picking up this pawn, so you live for a couple of moves. Rook d8. e5 maybe. Possibility. Okay, he's going bishop at f6 and just leaving this, but now I feel like queen sack is coming. And he takes with e, I guess, but now bishop at c6. Okay, b5. Is there actually mate threatened? Yeah, pawn at e5 and queen at d4. If you run here, there's queen at b4, so that's a threat. Pawn at e5 is mating. Okay, so what to do? White has some time advantage, so you can work this out maybe. Okay, he goes for rook at e6. If you take it, you have pawn at e8. F7, that's the idea at least. Oh, he's running out of time? Oh, he ran out of time. Wow. Alright. Let's quickly, I want to check quickly. I think it was this moment. Queen takes e6, something here. Why isn't it showing? It's loading. Okay. Yeah, this is totally winning for white. Pawn at d7, as I said, is made in a couple of moves. Okay. The idea is if bishop takes, there's bishop takes f7, king takes, and knight e5, and well, mate shortly. That was the easy one, but you had to check. You had to see king takes d7, and then you have to see this. That you can take here the rook, and if the king moves up, rook at if the rook also helps the mate, and otherwise rook at b8. Okay, so we quickly go back to live position, because that was 1-1 in the teamleague game, but now they are playing for the Crazy House World Championship. I'll update the title. Alright, there we go. Okay, so now it's yeah, it's a bit sad that the game ended in the flag, Hercules, last one. You're right. He should have taken on e6 and see what happens, or block on e7. And also I feel like Jasugi spent like 30 seconds on that move, so you can figure out that he's probably gonna play rook at a6. Alright, so now we have Crazy House World Championship. Both players are already in the candidates stage, but in the top bracket there are 4 matches who are playing for $25 each match. So the winner of this 10 game match gets $25, and he gets the bragging rights of not having lost in the knockout stage. And well, okay, let's quickly check. We have this position where no taking on d5 or any bishop move, just e5 and d4, taking the pawn on d2, and this is already a very sharp position with the bishops like this, the queen open, knight takes e4 looks like something, but probably there are problems with some knight at g7 move. Okay, so Jasugi is just trying to develop his pieces. Knight e2. And suggesting pawn at h3 mate to open up the king side, and also the queen side is already open, so the white king feels in I don't know, Hercules, about the winnings, donating to the furtherance of the game. That sometimes players make that decision, but I think they're free to choose. For example, I know that Opera Wason is already said that he is going to donate some, or already did donate, I'm not sure, some of his prize money, a big chunk of it back. So the question is why he played pawn at e6 and not e6. Probably he wants this pawn to cover f6 for any knight at h5 move later. That could have been a problem. Okay, so now Jasugi just castled into rook g8, and then he's probably going to play something at g3, but rook g8 seems like a useful move anyway. Make your opponent play something like pawn at g3. It's another pawn gone from the bank. And now you need to figure out how to bust open. Pawn at e3 seems like a good move. You could also just develop bishop at c6, trying to trade, and if white trades, you have developed a piece, and the white king is less safe. So Jasugi probably is going to not trade and then try something here. But then black can still go for pawn at e3 or e5 as suggested to open up this bishop. So Jasugi decides to trade queens, but he does get the king here. He has spotted something. He can take on h7. And also this knight is loose, but bishop takes g2. It's going to be problematic. Since black has a queen in hand. Yeah, that's a good comment, Hercules. The game has grown because of that, I think. So gsvc is just putting his queen on h8 here. So he can trade his rook now to the h file. And now, now it feels like there's problems. Pawn at h3 maybe not immediately. And you don't even have to take, you can first take on f3. And now you have something like knight at e2 to follow. So knight at e2 or just rook takes h3. Okay, some calculation needs to be done here on how to mate. I like this decision, just covering the back rank and threatening everything on h2. gsvc just putting pressure on the clock, but Jasugi is resourceful. He's playing quickly, and he's getting something. But pawn at h3 is possible. Pawn at f5 as well, just getting rid of this defender basically. Bishop here wins the queen. And at some stage you cannot stop sacrifices. But he's trying to build a fortress. So far it's working. Knight takes a 7. So queen at g6 played to attack and defend. Okay, now there's a fork. But gsvc is saying take my queen, I'll take your pieces on the g file. Yeah, you have to be decisive because I felt there was a mate probably somewhere around move 30, but okay, black won the game eventually, but if you're not gsvc you might just lose that game to Jasugi. I probably would have lost it, for example, after not finding the mate. Alright, so now we have this bishop g5 set up with h6 and g6, where black is developing bishop g7 and castles. And last couple of times I've played this, I've seen this played, the move c6 or c3 is played as well, and it's a good fortification of d5. Because as we saw in the first team league game, there are sometimes sacrifices possible on d5, and then the pawn can come to e5. So I like this for white, but I also like it for black. It's a position that can go both ways. Okay, and Jasugi taking his first break here to think a bit longer than a couple of seconds. And he's going for knight b3, knight b4 to get away with the d3 bishop. Because sometimes the weak point in these setups is the g6 pawn. Knight can come here and then you enter on g6. Alright, so the queen is coming to e8 to fortify f7 and g6, and it looks like there's nothing going on there, but there might be in the future, so it's a bit of a prophylactic move. So white pushing f4, queen is covering g2 later on, and there's maybe some f5 ideas, fortifying e5. c5 I think is a good response, trying to do something about this pawn chain. gsvc doesn't want e3 gone, being a good defender, so he just takes on c5 and allows the rook sacrifice on c3. And now the knight can come to f5. And I really like the how are you gonna break this? That's what Jasugi is saying. How should white break this? And on the other hand, black has some entry squares. He can fight for d3 or f3. He can go bishop b6 to put more pressure here. He can take on d3, put the knight on e4. And white only has this knight looking at the position yet. And he can maybe push g5. Okay, he's trying that. He's giving some counterplay. Bishop at h5. If you go g4, you give away another square. Oh, he's sacking the queen. Jasugi not taking. He could have gone for it maybe. But Jasugi deciding not to allow any nonsense here, and just being safe. So now we have Jasugi sacrificing a pawn, but now he has his entrance. f3 is no longer covered by pawns, so he can try to push for f3. For example, with knight takes, and the knight drops on f3, and you take the bishop. Or you just take here and repeat, maybe pawn here. So gsvc deciding to do something about this bishop. He needs to recover on the light squares. I really like the decision making by gsvc. It makes it hard to predict what he's gonna do. But then again, Jasugi should be equipped to find the right moves to counter gsvc's ideas. And here he should just be better. Something like this and something like this. Yeah, exactly, Hercules. Deciding not to go and allow any stuff here. And you do get a queen in hand, but the position is not open. Hey, at Finam. Yeah. Jasugi is 12teen indeed. Thanks for responding. And welcome, Chuck. Yeah, and now pawn at g2 should be enough. Yeah, and he resigns the game before knight at h4 with mate. Alright, so next game, e4. Not going again for knight c3 d4 line as we saw previous game. Jasugi switching it up. And just a reminder, these first two games are from Team League. As you can see, they were 5+5, and so it's now 1-1 in their game. This was played by the finisher as well in my game, and here I played e6, queen h4, and was happy to win that game. But now this is played. Don't know about bishop d7. So e6 still possible. Okay, knight takes e5 to pick this up. Now you can take back this pawn. You can also put a bishop here maybe to take like this. Okay, so it takes on b7, disrupting the king first, and e4 is still on next if you want. And now he takes e4, so he got back his pawn. And material actually is even now, I think. Ah no, white is up a piece. Queen h4 forces a knight to f2, or g3 covering the bishop. Yeah, gotta ask indeed, commenting in chat and in game chat as well, and also claiming that he is Jasugi. That would be a great great prank if that were true. Okay, so gsvc came up with pawn b2, so he wants to lure away the bishop from e3, and then he can put his pawn on e3. Jasugi is just developing, giving up the bishop. Queen takes f2 is now suggested, so you can go knight g4 and bishop e3. And you also have the option of going for a pawn or bishop here again to lure away the queen. Same motif. Then you can put a pawn or bishop here. I guess maybe bishop at g3, not now of course, but next is an option. Had some divine personality who has split it into two, maybe even three. So you could also be gsvc then. So he's running here to b1. Now you might just go knight f2 and pick up the bishop. And if you picked up the bishop, the king, if the king now moves to c1 and you pick up the bishop, there's also knight e2, taking stuff on c3. So maybe you have, yeah, you can moving the king to e1 also is not pleasant. So this is on. And the king cannot move to d2, so this is always with check, as the king has to move to either of these squares. So you need to try to cover this square, but it's not so easy. Maybe you can play bishop at d3. And as this is played, the king also has another square on c2. So he plays queen e3 to cover both bishops. Bishop at h6 is suggested to go knight e2 or knight d3. But I think maybe just ignore and you go queen takes a4, take here. And after knight d3 you just go king b1. But probably there's bishop at d5 first indeed. Okay, so now bishop at d5. But gsvc has managed to put his pieces on the board. And although white has two queens, black seems to be doing fine. Ooh, allowing this, I don't know. Jasugi taking over, I feel. He sacked his queen for a couple of pieces, and now the black king is in immediate danger. Pawn d2, rook at c8. To make him use at least a blocker. The threat is of course queen at d1. Takes, and then some knight f2, knight takes c3. I don't know. Maybe it's not even mating. But he plays queen b4. Ideas here, and the king can go to b2. Now rook at c8 wins. I feel you have to block with the queen or go king e7. Same motif, maybe queen at b8. I don't know. So king b2, queen b4 vacated that square. And Jasugi now is trying to just take all the pieces. You could even take on d5, I guess, with knight at c6. And black resigns. Alright. And that's 3-2 overall, but 2-1 in Crazy House World Championship. And Jasugi revisiting this g6 line. He did well last game. And gsvc has delayed the development of this knight, so maybe he's going to push c4 as is suggested. Knight d2, rook c1, c4, something. Now he played h3 and queen d7, and this, yeah. This usually seems to favor the side that is attacking h3, but maybe gsvc has a refutation here. So he decided to let f3 be taken and then take back with the bishop. And now he's saying, okay, I have some threats on b7 and c6. Jasugi ignoring his queen, giving up the queen for a knight and a pawn. You could also just take here if you want, and then bishop g3. So yeah, I guess this is the critical move. He goes for it. And he plays pawn on d5 to take away this. Yeah, this is going to be black's plan, putting pieces, his many minor pieces on the king side, and white does have an extra queen, but the queen is not really useful in the defense here because it can be trapped easily, and then black gets the queen in hand and he wins the game. So now knight at g5 is the plan, and followed by some pawn here to open up the g2 square. So where do you put the queen? That's going to take some time, I guess. I feel like maybe putting it on e2 is best, but still not. E2, pawn at h3, or just bishop at h5. pick up the queen. Okay, he's going aggressive. He's going after b7. So now he's going for g2. And he always has a move like bishop at e4 if he wants. So bishop at d5 played to prevent bishop at e4. But now pawn at h3. Suggestion of f4 to get rid of this knight could be an option indeed. You are giving away some squares. Maybe before it was also possible before putting a bishop here. Wow, nice find by black. If you take it, knight at f3, bishop takes, well, bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, pawn at g2 wins. So he's taking, but if you take back, there's probably rook at d8. That's what gsvc is trying, or maybe bishop takes f7. But also this bishop can take the rook, and that's also helping. Okay, so queen at f8 to block. Queen takes a8 to cover f3, but then you trade. And then white has to play rook at e8. And then you can put a queen on f8 again, and then knight at f3 is again a mating threat. So you can just take, indeed. If rook at e8, you can just put queen at f8 again. And maybe even bishop now. So if rook takes, we have the knight at f3 checkmate pattern again. So he takes on f8. Queen takes f8 seems safe. Bishop f8 probably was also not losing, but this is just easier. So knight at f3, if you take with the knight, it's going to be mate. If you take with the bishop, that was probably also mate. Nice, Hercules. I saw your comment a bit late. All hobbies suck, but if you keep at it, you might find at the end that you've managed to kill some precious time. Yeah. Nice one. This is slightly different. No bishop here. And now f3 played. Slightly different setup. And white's normal development, if not disturbed, is knight e2 and castles. Put the bishop somewhere. So queen h4 was expected. Quick response with knight at f2. Problem is, if you move the king, there's knight at g3 and stuff on h1 happening. So he takes on e5 to open up the bishop. Putting pressure on f2. This looks good for black actually. If g3, just take on f2. Okay, so knight f4 is played, and if you take, there might be something here. So take, bishop takes, and you cannot go pawn at g3 because I'll just take that, and if you take here, there's bishop at h2 with threats. So yeah, how to defend? You could play knight at g4 as he does. Oh, sorry about that. Variance only wants queen takes h3. Not really sure. The idea is if you take, there's knight takes h3 and pawn at g2 ideas. But the e3 is also hanging, you have to watch out for that. So he's covering f3. Still no pawn at g3, I think, because you just take twice, blocker, and then some knight f4. So now he goes knight at g2. He really wants to get rid of this dark square pressure. But you can take on. Can you take here? Probably not, because knight takes f4. So take here first. Okay. Then take on h2 maybe. Depends a bit on how he takes back. So h2 first. Okay, pawn g3. Why not take with the knight? Don't know. He really wants this knight to stay on g4. If takes, he wants to take. But then knight at g3 just looks crushing, actually. How many flowers do I have, Panda Bears? I'll check on Discord for you. How do you do it again? You can go. I saw you joined Discord. You can go to spam and then type points and $sign. I have 117 flowers. 117. Okay. So let's focus on the game. Although flowers are very important as well. Pawn at f2 is worth thinking about. Also maybe just pawn at h2 and knight at g3. Knight at f2. Wow, he's taking the knight. How does it mate? With knight at h3 and or knight at f3. Depends a bit on what happens. He has takes, and he has knight at h3, king here, knight here, and knight f3 covering the retreat. The rook is in the way of stuff. So now he's going for the same line, but the queen has been removed from d1. So now the king can go to d1, but you can pick up the queen. And then slowly try to figure out what to do next. You have the queen in hand, you have knight takes e5 threats. Knight takes e5, you cannot take because queen at d1. This is also fine, putting pressure on d3 and e2. Alright, and he takes a game back. So now it's 3-2. And gsvc has white, so you could say it's still going equal. Yeah, gsvc won this game, but it's going up to 10. So first to 5.5 points wins the match. Okay, so bishop d5. Sometimes you trade, as he does here, but bishop back to claim that the bishop is a bit worse on d7 is also an idea. Okay, so no queen d7 possible, but still the bishop is going back to f5. Knight g3 seems logical. So maybe then bishop f5 could be set. That's a similar or a small mistake, I should say. And white might have gained some time there. He could try bishop at d3, for example, push f5. Okay, so gsvc again going for pawn at g5 and trying to break open on the dark squares. And if you take, he takes with the pawn and he says, okay, thank you for the open f-file. So just going for queen d7, going after h3. If you take here, you can take here, I guess. So he's taking on d5. If you take, you can take with the queen, and there's knight e7 picking up the queen again. Nice find. And the bishop is also gone from d7, so no longer a problem on h3. Knight e4 I like because it's covering f6 and also trying to get rid of this one, and then you can put the knight you've gained on e2 maybe. But yeah, white has two bishops and a pawn in hand here. He has lots of possibilities. Bishop at e7 is suggested, looks like a good move. Attacking some squares. But you have to watch out for any stuff on e2. So he's trying to lure this knight away and keeping this knight as a defender here. I like that decision. And now he's just putting pressure on f6. Probably Jasugi is going to reinforce, as we see. Pawn at g5, disrupting the bishop. Now you maybe have to try pawn at f2, I guess. Pawn at h2, I mean, yeah. King h1. Yeah, the knight is covering f2 as well. Don't take on f6 like this, that's losing. Yeah, white feels like it's winning, but there are some tricks you have to watch out. Bishop here, covering. There was, for example, a move like queen at g1 in some variations. And now maybe knight takes f2 is good. Okay, it's not possible because gsvc gets rid of it. G takes f6. Jasugi is defending. Queen at g1 was not enough, I guess. Might have been some tricks there, but... Okay, watch out for knight at g5 takes queen h6 and queen h8. That's the threat here. So knight e4 covers. And attacks. And Jasugi might have chances here, and he's taking over, I guess. Knight takes f2 is just the winning threat. So knight g5, you have to take with the knight. Now you threaten rook at h8 mate, so gsvc is trying to create mating threats. Rook at h8, king takes, pawn at g7 is made in a couple of moves, I guess. Yeah, this pawn comes in. Okay, so Jasugi calculating queen at g1 for sure. Bishop takes, promotes, king takes. Yeah, it's mate. Oh, yeah, I think it's mate. Panda Bear's asking if there's positional crazy house. Yeah, there is for sure. It's mostly tactics, but especially when you get more trained or more experience, it's knight at h4 is going to finish. King g2, nice one. Nicely played by Jasugi, surviving the attack there. But about your question, Panda Bears, it's tactics arise maybe out of positional mistakes. You could you could say, and this match it's all about positional crazy house, or at least when white is playing d4, as in the gsvc games, and then it's about putting your pieces on the right squares, and somebody makes a positional mistake, and then tactics arise. But tactics are really important as in chess as well. But in Crazy House, I guess tactics are more missed. So then there are just so many resources in the position, and we see just a couple of them. Hey, Rick Deckard, thanks for the follow. As well as Tel's Last Cigarette, thanks as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next game. The queen went to d6, and d5 is now pushed, and knight e5. And c3 was a bit slow maybe, as Kadask is pointing out. But why do you put the queen? Probably back to d6. Then knight c4, gain some time. And if you have knight c4, you have pawn at h6 as well. If you can get this knight into play with the gain of tempo. So just a reminder, guys, this is actually 4 against 2. And these first two games don't count for the World Championship. They were a team league game. Okay, so as expected, queen d6 and knight c4 very quickly played, because pawn at h6 is going to be annoying. Maybe not now. Probably it was interesting as suggested to go bishop b5 in between and then maybe knight g4. But alright, we have just h3 preventing bishop g4. And not going for pawn h6 now, since there's nothing to follow up with. And on the other hand, black has to worry about it all the time. And he's trying to put his pieces on the board. Knight e4, looking at g3 next, or just pawn at g3 immediately. Okay, the knight gets a rest. Can go back to d6. If trades, that's probably helping, or even c takes is possible. Pawn g3 was also an idea here, sacking the knight takes and knight e4. And then you take back with the bishop and you have a nice attack, because the bishop is still on f1. Okay, but we have a trade on c4. Maybe pawn g3 was critical actually. Hey Diana Mirza, thanks for the follow. Pawn at g3 probably critical. Okay, we'll see. Now I can maybe go bishop d3 and bishop c2 with pawn c4 played. e6 is also something to consider. He just goes b3 to cover the bishop. He wants his stronghold on d5. So what do you do here? Bishop f5 maybe? Then castles, I guess. But you could try then maybe bishop knight takes e4 and bishop d3. Ah, Diana Mirza is a streamer. Alright. Welcome. Also Chess Kibitzer, welcome. Yeah, we are, for those just joining, we are now watching Crazy House, indeed, Crazy House World Championship. Bit of a show match, because both players are already in the candidates phase. But the organizers decided to let them play one more match for a bounty of $25. Okay, so if you don't take the knight here, this is going to be very disruptive. And e6 is going to be a problem. Might have been a possibility here, but I guess bishop at f6 is fine. I wanted to break open f7 heroically. Knight at c6 aiming at the queen. If you take, the bishop is taken and the problem resolves itself. Ooh, queen takes e4 could be an option soon. Yeah, now this queen is going to be lost. If you move it, let's say somewhere, knight at f6 is going to crush you. Or has he found something here? You have to go king h2, I feel. If king h1, knight at g3. Oh, he's allowed knight at g3. So that's going to be played. And then king h2, okay. Still safe. Okay, so 6-3 it shows, but again the first two games were so it's 5-2 in the CWC standings, and Jasugi needs one more game to win the match. And we are going to see an e4 game by gsvc, e4, e5. And we have a very sharp line already, knight g5. This is crazy. I've not seen this position before, or anything that looks like it. The idea is of course that you can take this, but then this is on. And if you take on d5, there's knight at d3. Could be annoying. Knight at d3, and you can take on d4, or you can go knight f4, or bishop here. Bishop h3. Bishop h3, what's the follow? Alright, thanks for the follow, Just Naruto. He goes pawn at e2. He wants to disrupt and take on c1. Banderbeer saying who is the strongest candidate to win the championship? I would say Jasugi, probably, if I had to pick one. But yeah, the Operation is the champion, the reigning champion. So you have to beat Operation in the finals, and that's not an easy task. Operation is when he sets his mind to it, he's going to be very devoted to play very good Crazy House. But I think Jasugi is a good pick to win the candidates, and otherwise gsvc maybe. gsvc was already close to winning last time in the 3+2 section. Yeah, Klekas being too modest. I should of course have said that I was the best chance of winning. Okay, so now Jasugi has allowed some counterplay. I thought maybe he had to go for bishop h3, but I don't know. There are some problems here. And knight d5. King d8, knight e6. Yeah, the queen gets taken with check. That's something to take into account. But Jasugi has found a defense. Yeah, gsvc has beaten 12-teen, aka Jasugi. So gsvc is also a very good, strong candidate. And I guess maybe as an outsider you could say Chicken Crossroad is also up there. But I guess if all the candidates are known, we can make some predictions. Probably there's also going to be some fantasy competition there. Okay, so bishop c4 I like because it's attacking and also defending your... So I guess you can respond with bishop e6. Because if bishop e6, you might threaten some bishop e6. You're threatening queen takes d2. Let's say bishop e6 and random move. Queen takes d2 takes bishop at h3. King has to move to g3 or g1, and knight e2 is mate in any case. So I think bishop e6. Okay, Jasugi going for bishop d3. Why not bishop e6 first? Because now he doesn't have an extra bishop. And also not really an attack. But if there's queen trades, there's queen at d1 maybe. Bishop h3 is covering g2, so the idea is now off the table. And now there might be a mating sequence here. Okay, he's not going for it. Who is the greatest? Yeah, maybe. All right, let's focus on the ending of the game here. Looks over. Queen at d1, queen takes d2. If you take, there's pawn at d2. How are you going to defend? They actually did that, Panda Bears. There were bracket predictions. I guess you could check here. I don't know. I'm familiar with the basketball brackets though. Maybe they look different, but there are predictions here. All right, white resigns, and that's the game. That's 6-2. Well played by Jasugi and gsvc. This was very interesting. I want to show you the idea I had in this one because I felt it's a really pretty picture. Don't know if it's working. Okay, let's see if there was a mistake made here. Okay, so knight at d3, king f1. I felt bishop h3 was really strong here. The computer, after some thought, is giving black some advantage. You might say Hercules best, that Jan Lee is just the greatest. And that's combined his play and his contribution to the game. Yeah, so this bishop h3 was really strong, but okay, let's move on. He went for this and now queen b5 and white is better. So bishop d7. White still better. Queen takes, bishop e7 and bishop at c4. Okay, now you play bishop at e6 and probably it's still better. After queen takes e6, okay, that's probably why bishop at d3 was played, but let's say he makes a random move. Then you have this really nice queen takes d2 idea. Ah, it isn't working, okay. The bishop is covering e2. Lol. Went to all this trouble to show you something that isn't working. Okay, but that's what happens, I guess. Okay, here black could have taken over, but in the end he won anyway. Because gsvc messed up somewhere. Or he resigned in a winning position. Ah, no, Stockfish is just a bit slow. Hey Skimat, thanks for the follow. Let's see what happens. It's nothing. Yeah, I guess with Hercules with the computer coming in and Crazy Era, Stockfish, and stuff like that. I feel like newer players are, if they really want to, they can get better quickly. You can see, for example, a player like Kadask, who's also active in checking lines with Crazy Era, is beating Genly regularly, but still Genly is up there now. But I guess if the game develops onwards, there might be he might get overtaken, but he's still up there, and he's probably has a winning record against any set Crazy House player. If you just look at the Crazy House games, so that's just amazing. Alright, guys, I'm gonna call it a night. It's past midnight here, so I'll leave you this one, and let's raid Pepe. He's seems to be analyzing the Crazy House. Maybe he'll play some other moves, other things afterwards. See you next time, and have a good night wherever you are.